want to welcome you to the second of two special European Nights Hour broadcasts on the American Nationalist Network. This program will continue the discussion between the EKP director and founder, Giacomo Vallone, and cultural critique author and editor of the Occidental Observer, Dr. Kevin MacDonald, talking about various topics ranging from funding the movement and what it will take and what we're up against, to the importance of being allowed to have our own culture and how every Western culture is being attacked, and obviously a lot more. Please note that due to technical issues, Dr. Kevin MacDonald's end of the EKP conversation has an echo. Unfortunately, we cannot eliminate that echo here. Please bear with it because the content is definitely worth it. Let's dive right in.
Yeah, again, we have Dr. Kevin MacDonald here with us, and we're going to tie up the show discussing, we probably don't have enough time to talk about some of the research he's done, which we're going to save for another show, so certainly we'll keep you abreast of that. I have a ton of questions we're going to go through next time, but for now I think let's end the show with an interesting idea about the solutions, because obviously we're here for a reason. We want to find solutions, we want to find the best way forward for our nations and our people. So maybe I could ask you, Dr. MacDonald, in terms of solutions for the United States, and then maybe address solutions for Europe, for let's say for Great Britain and individual European states. What would you say the solution is? How can we rebuild our societies? I mean, what's going to be a necessary step we're going to have to take to rebuild the societies?
Well, at this point, we are so defeated and so brought down that it's very almost anything would be an improvement. There are several things. One thing is that we have to get people who have a lot of money on our side. I mean, one of the big advantages that the left has is that they are very, very well funded. We don't have any, really serious source of funding. Right now in the United States, the pro-immigration side is greatly aided by the fact that you have all these billionaires that are in favor of even further relaxations on immigration law, having more immigrants and so on. If you look at the Israel lobby, I study the organized Jewish community, and they are very, very well funded. The ADL probably takes in at least $30 million a year. The Southern Poverty Law Center takes in $30 million a year. Republican Jewish Coalition probably donated $150 million to the Republican Party last year on condition that they support everything that Israel wants. So Israel is everything connected with Israel is very, very well funded. They have dozens of think tanks in Washington. They support many, many people. On our side, there are probably a handful of people who are working full time for trying to advocate for white interests. And they are not paid well. They are not living high off the hog. Abraham Foxman makes like $800,000 a year as head of the ADL. Someone like, who's the head of, let's say, Countercurrents or some of these other organizations and websites, they're scraping by. They're just they're barely making a living.
I mean, our website reaches about 250,000 people a month, and I've not made a penny off of it. I've spent money keeping it alive. So, right. I know exactly what you're saying. I mean, I don't even bother asking for donations because I just know that when you do, it's pennies. And almost, unfortunately, a lot of the folks who read the information or read the articles seem to think it cheapens the message also, which is another problem. Somehow, if you ask for donations or you ask for support, it somehow cheapens the message. And this is a huge problem. And our movement receives no support whatsoever. And it appears to be... There's not changing. I mean, we had a donation button once on the site when we had the old site. We received nothing practically, a couple pennies here and there. So I decided to take it off completely and just use my own money to finance it. And I mean, how do we change the hearts and minds of people? How do we get them to realize that unless we kind of do find we do find a way forward, that it's all downhill from this point forward. If there's no way to support this movement, there's nothing left. I mean, there's really no other choice at this point.
Right. I think there are enough white people who have a lot of money. It's just that right now, for one reason or another, they're not stepping up. And I'm talking about really big money. I mean, for example, someone like Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, they give their money to various charitable causes, but it tends to aid blacks. They have a lot of African stuff, medical research. That's all. I have no problem with medical research, but the problem is that they are not helping their people, and so we need that. I think what we're trying to do here is raise consciousness, and then eventually some people will step forward that they really have some money. I think one billionaire could change the world. I know with UKIP there was a very wealthy Englishman who was going to provide a huge amount of money for UKIP. I don't know if he came through on that, but that's the kind of thing that can make a difference. All of a sudden you've got all these ads on television. All of a sudden you've got people who can have a job, who can make a career and a life out of advocating for their people, for the interests of their people. That makes a huge difference. In the case of the organized Jewish community, there are thousands of Jews who are supported, make a living in the organized Jewish community, working for the ADL, working for these think tanks, working for pro-Israel organizations. We don't have that. We don't have any infrastructure. And so that's something that has to change. And it probably has to happen before, in the United States, we can get a political movement going. For example, Greg Johnson at Countercurrents, he has long advocated the idea we have to do metapolitics before we do politics. That is, we have to sort of create a sort of intellectual, cultural movement before we can really get into the political arena. I can sort of see the logic of that. I would support any political party that would try in the United States, and I support the American Freedom Party. But we're a long ways off, and we have to create a climate. We have to create a sort of intellectual, cultural alternative that people resonate with. And we do see this, one by one every day. I get emails from people. We just got this email from a college student. She's very interested in the European identity, white identity. She wants to get active. She wants to write. Well, there are a lot of people. And one thing that really has changed, and I'm very optimistic about, is that young people are resonating to it. When I first started going to some meetings in the 1990s, it seemed like people were, the main group were these older white guys. They were in their 60s, 70s, 80s. And they'd been around for a long time and nothing had happened. Now, when I go to these organizations, I see young people like Richard Spencer, who's the head of Alternative Right and the National Policy Institute and so on, doing great work. And there are a lot of young people who are involved now because they see, it's the young people who are going to be disenfranchised by the future. These are the people that can't get the jobs that they would have had without all this onslaught. These are the people who are struggling economically, and they are not going to recognize the country that they are in as they get older. So it's very encouraging that young people are getting involved. So we have to create this metaculture, this culture where identifying as a white person and pursuing white interests is legitimate and morally legitimate. We have to have morality on our side. One of the things I've stressed over and over in my writing is that white people, I think more than any other people by far, resonate to being in a moral community. The success of the left has happened because we have allowed them to actually dominate the high ground morally. We have to dominate. We have to present a moral case for our interests. And part of that is that's why the scandal in Rotterdam is so important. I wrote an article on Occidental Observer about that. The moral dimension is critical. We have to have the sense that keeping Pakistanis out of England has a moral dimension for the traditional people and culture of England. That by bringing them in, you're subjecting them to this horrific culture that people who hate them will exploit them. And there's no need for that. And so these are the things that I think are driving people our way. When they see that their interests are being compromised, when they see that we have a moral message, that there's no moral imperative to give up your culture, to allow yourselves to be displaced as a people. There is no moral imperative for that. And we have as much a right to establish our own people, our own cultures as anybody. Nobody says that Korea has to import 50 million Africans and become non-Korean, or import Pakistanis and Chinese or whatever. Nobody says that about any other culture except for every Western culture. Every Western culture is denied legitimacy, denied the right to be itself.
No,
so we changed.
No, certainly. I think it might be easier in countries like Britain or Italy, where there's a national identity.
That's right. I think that's one reason why UKIP has happened in England, but we don't have anything like that in America.
Because obviously in the United States, I mean, this is not meant to be offensive in any way. There is really no American ethnicity. Obviously, the American ethnicity, it's a multiracial ethnicity almost. Whereas in England, there's an Englishman, there's an indigenous English person. So it's quite easy to say.
I think America did have a sort of implicit white identity.
Anglo-Saxon.
America, you have the black-white thing that's been going on for centuries, and so it's natural for us to think of ourselves as white because then there's the blacks. But the idea of a sort of explicitly racial white America was defeated by these movements that I talk about in the Culture of Critique by Franz Boas and the rise of this of anthropology, this cultural relativism, and
through the Frankfurt School and the
Frankfurt School, all those intellectual movements destroyed the idea of a racially based white nation, which was in place in the 1920s. In the 1920s, America restricted immigration, kept out. The bias was entirely towards Western Europe, and they affirmed that. But since then, the intellectual battles were all lost. The academic world became multicultural, anti-white left. That's the reality we live in now. So it was there, and it could be there again. So? But we're a long way from getting there.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the race identity was damaged, quite a few generations ago. But the cultural identity, the American cultural identity, the Anglo-Saxon culture of the United States, for me, that's only been destroyed in the last 30 to 40 years.
That's right.
I mean, I recognized when I was a kid, growing up, baseball. I mean, you'll play baseball, and the heroes on the television were guys like, I don't want to say Pete Rose, but even Pete Rose, with his gambling problems. But just baseball players, white baseball players, and people of all different backgrounds recognize these people as, as kind of the champions of the culture. And today, kids, black kids have their black hero, and now, unfortunately, white kids have their black hero as well. So, white kids, for some odd reason, identify more with rappers, and they identify more with baseball. I'm going to give you an interesting story real quick. I'm a big American football fan growing up. When I moved to Europe, I lost touch with American sports, and I decided in 2009 to watch Super Bowl when I was in Italy. So I decided to download it and get it onto my computer, and I popped it on the large TV. I kind of did the whole thing with a little barbecue, and I turned it on, and I was quite shocked at what I saw. What I saw was a bunch of white guys who looked extremely rural American, typically Southern white fellas playing football, and they were hooting and hollering on the sidelines with a very black voice. And I was quite surprised by this because this is not something I remember in the United States, where the white fellows who looked obviously very white, they didn't come across like white guys, feigning black background. These were white guys, looked very white, had white haircuts, but they were on the sidelines hooting and hollering with the black guys. In the end zone, when they scored, they were dancing like black fellas. And I immediately thought to myself, this is not the America I remember. I mean, that's not what I can imagine, Mike Schmidt would have done in baseball if he hit a home run. He wouldn't have, danced on home plate and done a little jive dance. And I was quite shocked by that. And I think I recognized that American culture has kind of, not just the racial identity has changed, but the cultural identity has moved from one of kind of Anglo-Saxon Americanism to this kind of almost like, I don't want to say negrification of the culture, but it almost felt like it was like a negrification of the culture. And one could say this is obviously down to the Jewish media and the Jewish film industry and the music industry. But is that something that's transpired, or is it my imagination?
No, that's absolutely right. I mean, you see the cultural displacement of white America. When I was growing up in the 1950s, white, like you say, television, newspapers, politicians, everything. We were a white country. We were 90% white. And that has changed. Demographically, now 65% But the media, when you look at the media, you can easily forgive people for thinking that it's much less than that, because we've been displaced to such a great extent in terms of the popular media, the popular music, sports. If you look at ads on television, white people are portrayed as foolish, as stupid, silly. Black people are portrayed as wise, as masculine, that sort of thing.
I should laugh, but it is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It sounds ridiculous. It sounds completely.
Yeah, but you have all these ads in movies where black guys are the doctors or the physicists or the engineers. They're the people with the brains. And it's just so counter reality but that's the message we've been getting from the media for decades. And of course, the black academic performance hasn't changed at all. The IQ hasn't changed. The school performance hasn't changed. They constantly need affirmative action to get any kind of education. So it's sort of inversion of reality. But that's what happens when you don't control a culture anymore. That is what you're being displaced, and in the process.
No, certainly. I mean, we wrote an article with our website, the denigration of white culture in the United States, the denigration of Anglo-Saxon culture in the United States, and we obviously pointed at specific individuals in the media, and who I think 12 of 13 studios are run by Jewish males. So it's kind of hard to, especially when Jews don't really they don't recognize themselves. They don't see themselves as white, so they have no interest in, embracing white culture. You'll find very few Jewish people have any interest whatsoever in, quote, Anglo-Saxon American culture. But they've embraced this kind of, subculture, which is destructive. And I mean, I don't see how anyone, regardless of nationality in the United States, can see that this culture is productive. I mean, pushing this sort of music on, young children that promotes drug use and sexual abuse and violence and using weapons, and I mean what sort of person would want to push this on young people? I don't really understand it. It can't only about making money. Is there some sort of strategy involved? Would you say? I mean, your expert opinion.
Well, absolutely. I think that one of the biggest myths about Jewish involvement in the media is constantly being put forward by the ADL and other organizations like that yes, there's a lot of Jews in the media, but they are not acting as Jews. But the reality is that the values of the mainstream media in America reflect the values of the mainstream Jewish community, and they're not the same as the rest of white America. And from the time that Jews really became a presence in the United States in the early 20th century, they have not identified with the traditional people and culture of America. They have seen themselves as outsiders. They've seen themselves as persecuted, as having sort of being hostile towards Christianity, for example.
Yeah.
And so they've had this point of view, and as they got more and more powerful in the 1950s and then especially in the 1960s and after that view has come to the fore more and more. So we see, they're very common to see movies that are hostile towards Christianity, movies that are hostile towards the white history and so on. But very few movies there are really no movies that are all critical about Jewish influence or anything else. Jews are always presented as victims. We have just hundreds of Holocaust movies. You have all these movies on Jim Crow and segregation and slavery and all that. The cast all of white America as evil. So that's a constant drumbeat now. That is something that reflects the attitudes of the mainstream Jewish community. And it's very different from the attitudes of the rest of white America. I've documented that in detail in some of my writings.
No, certainly. I mean, I look at it. It might be overly simplistic, but from afar, it appears that the American media and academia, they compartmentalize people into either victim and oppressor. And movies do that best. I mean, you have 12 Years a Slave, which portrays the European American landowner as this monster. The black woman is this kind of totally sexually abused, and she ends up being voted the most beautiful woman in the world, if I recall correctly, now by People magazine. So this movie had this insane narrative where white man was a monster, the black man was a professional violin player, and this wonderful African woman was abused by all these different white men. And obviously there's elements of truth to all these different stories, but it seems like the media sends us down a path where there's going to be an oppressor and a victim, and we can just guess just based on the background of the person whether he is the oppressor or the victim, and that's quite remarkable. That there's like even kind of no semblance of reality to whatsoever to even Hollywood film.
Yes, it's been going on now for decades, but it's a moral message. And again, the moral message is whites are evil, white culture is evil, Christianity is evil. And it's been going on. And the problem, it makes a difference. I mean, if you had, say, a group like the Gypsies or even Black Americans, they tend not to be very economically successful. The problem is that Jews are very successful.
Yeah.
They occupy the top positions in society. They are an elite. And so it makes a difference. These changes that have happened have been top down. They've started at the most elite academic institutions, in the case of Franz Boas at Columbia, the Harvard, and all these Ivy League universities. They were the first ones to change. Then the media, the political process of the Israel lobby, where they're focusing on the president and Congress and so on. These are all the top institutions of the society. So this is a top-down revolution. And they've just gradually worn away and propagandized. But I think there is a limit, and I do think that quite a few white people are waking up. There's an anger there. A lot of them don't know how to express it because they don't. If they listen to Fox News, they want something conservative. They feel, but their only alternatives are people like Rush Limbaugh and Bill O'Reilly. They don't give them that information that they have to start thinking of themselves as a white person. They have to be proud of their culture. And so on. They don't get that message from anywhere. And so that is what is killing us. We have to get that message out. And again, it would really help if we got some serious money behind our message. Then we could purchase, you could buy TV networks. You could buy advertising, that kind of thing. Our message is just completely underground now. I mean, we have the internet, and it is there, but you have to look for it. And a lot of people, most white Americans just want to live their lives. They want to have fun. They want to
which is true, unfortunately. Yeah, 100%.
They want to buy things. They're not interested in this. And quite a few white Americans aren't really influenced by it. If you live in a small town, in Oregon or Minnesota or someplace, you're not really affected by this. You don't care. And so you just want to have fun, enjoy your life, get a lot of possessions, take nice trips. That's what your world is about. And this immigration onslaught doesn't affect you, but it's affecting more and more people. It's almost like you can't avoid it now. It's getting harder and harder to avoid it. White people keep moving away, but it's only so far you can go. At some point, you have to face the reality that there's no place to go.
Yeah, I mean, my primary objective is preserving the countries I feel are my homelands. So obviously it's slightly different from an American person or a white American person who has a white American identity. For me, it's more about preserving Great Britain and then Italy, because I mean I've seen the changes in both those countries, and they're quite different. Different ethnic groups have come into both countries and caused problems. Italy doesn't have the same issues with Islam as England does. They have different groups of people coming from Eastern Europe, and again different groups from Asia and Africa as well. So it's a slightly different dynamic. But I think if you look at the overall general perspective, is that immigration is obviously the biggest issue. I mean, if they could just, in Europe, if they literally today could just close all the borders, every country could just close its borders, they could really make some changes quickly. The U.S., it's going to be very difficult because the changes have already been, far-reaching. But in Europe, the changes are still quite small. If you go to Italy, if you travel to Italy, the changes aren't that recognizable, really. You're talking about in parts of rural areas of the United States, you don't see things happening. In Italy, you can drive hundreds of miles and not see anything strange.
Right, that's what strikes me. I've gone to Europe is that the immigrants tend to cluster in communities, and so it's easy not to see them. It's like you're hardly aware. In quite a bit of Europe, even countries that have been inundated, you don't notice it as much as you would. I remember when I was in Denmark, though, they had this big Turkish festival right in the big downtown area. Then you were very aware of it.
It's Denmark.
Of Copenhagen was taken over by these people.
That's
but
Denmark. Yeah.
That's probably unusual.
It is. I mean, typically the farther you go south and along the Mediterranean, especially, the cultures are, I won't say richer because that's unfair, but certainly stronger. There's a stronger flavor of the culture, and the locals are much more fiercely proud of their cultures. So you tell an Italian that the food coming from Zimbabwe is better than his food, and you're likely to get punched in the face. You tell an Englishman or a Danish person that it's better, and they'll say, yes, it's true. It's true. 100% true.
Okay, we're going to take a few moments to recognize other outstanding shows on the American Nationalist Network. Gio and Kevin will pick up right where they left off.
Something Northern Europeans. Northern Europeans seem to be a special breed.
Oh yeah.
They're very, they tend to be very idealistic, very non-ethnocentric, very open, very nice people.
Almost naive.
But that's the problem. They're too nice, and I think they're going to be destroyed if they don't wake up.
I mean, the Swedes are probably the poster children for naivety. I mean,
that's right. The Swedes are a paradigm, I think.
That's a crazy country. I mean, I don't know if you were aware of recently the prime minister of the country. My wife is half Swedish, so I spent a lot of time in Sweden. The prime minister of the country, he stated for the record that the elderly will have to make sacrifices, possibly turn their heating down. Sweden's cold. I mean, we're not talking about Santa Barbara cold or England cold, minus 40, minus 50 in the winter. And he told that the elderly that they might have to turn their heating down because Sweden has a moral obligation to make sure that the immigrants coming in, the new wave of immigrants coming in from Somalia and Africa to escape different situations in these areas. There's a moral obligation to assist these people. So the Swedish people have to sacrifice. And there was barely a peep out of the Swedish people. I mean, in Italy, that wouldn't happen. I mean, they might do it, but they would keep it quiet. In Sweden, they literally just advertise that we're going to have to take money from your benefit check, your pension, because we have to give it to some Somalian guy so he can rape your granddaughter.
There's something about it, we call it pathological altruism, and it seems to be worse in Northern Europe. Northwestern Europe, these Nordic peoples, they have a sense of a self-sacrifice on behalf of others. And that's why I stress these moral communities, because they're the paradigm. My impression of Sweden is that it's absolutely locked down political correctness, where you can't talk about any negative thing about immigration, or you'll be seen as a moral pariah, evil, racist, Nazi, and all that. And they have this strong sense of this moral in-group, and it's entirely on the left. It's entirely anti-white and anti-traditional Sweden. It's just amazing to see it. But what we call pathological altruism, because altruism is dangerous if you give up too much.
That was on my list of questions to explain pathological altruism to the audience. That was something that actually I wanted to ask you. Maybe you could give them a little background on what the theory of pathological altruism is.
Pathological altruism is when you are altruistic to the point that it really seriously injures you. I mean, it's one thing to help someone, pick up something that they dropped or something, or help out people who really need it of your own culture and so on. But pathological altruism is when you start to really you give too much, and a lot of these people are really nice, and it's like women who'll take you. And
you're breaking up here.
50 cats, or they do things on behalf of others, and so this is obviously, from an evolution point of view, this is a non-starter. I mean, one of the big issues in theoretical biology for the last 50 years has been altruism. And the big point has been that altruism can't survive genetically, that it keeps getting weeded out because altruists are so self-sacrificing. But when you have these moral in-groups that I think evolved in the north of Europe, you have groups that developed these moral communities, and they were very self-sacrificing within the community, very cooperative. They endeavored to have a good reputation, moral reputation. So if you had a bad reputation in these prototypical Nordic communities, you were expelled. And in the Ice Ages, when in prehistoric times, that was the kiss of death. So these communities were not based on kinship, which is what you see in the Pakistanis and the rest of the world, really. Kinship is everything. In the Northern European communities, kinship meant very little, if anything. What mattered was your moral reputation. And so they create these moral in-groups, but at the extreme, it becomes pathological. You see this, for example, when they had this earthquake in Haiti, there was all this disaster down there. There are all these white American women wanting to adopt black babies. And we see this in America now, all these underprivileged kids. You don't have your own children, you help others. And it's pathological because you're doing things that compromise your own legitimate biological interests. No other group does this. And so if you keep doing it, you are going to become extinct. You're going to certainly, your fitness is going to be harmed. But it seems to be a pathology among white people that we are very prone to taking the moral high ground. I mean, one of the things I've been writing about lately is the movement to end slavery. Now, I'm not saying I'm in favor of slavery. I'm not in favor of slavery. But it's very interesting to see the actual movement to oppose slavery was framed as a moral issue. And the only culture that ever ended slavery was white European culture. And they did it because of empathy for the victims of slavery. The propaganda of the anti-slavery movement stressed the suffering of black Africans. And people were empathic with that. And they wanted to help. And we see that now. So the Prime Minister of Sweden does this thing where he wants wants native Swedes to make sacrifices on behalf of these Africans. Well, it's the same kind of thing. And so this is the problem in our culture. We have to understand it for what it is. And that it was a strength back when you had homogeneous white cultures. They were created with a strong sense of moral. You could trust people in the community. We create societies of high trust. These other cultures in Africa and Asia, they have low trust cultures. You can't trust people unless they're your close kin. So European cultures have been able to create these cultures of high trust, and it's been very adaptive.
But when you say European culture, I mean, having lived in Europe for quite a long time, a lot of when you're on the Mediterranean, the cultures around the Mediterranean and in Eastern Europe, they're not as altruistic. The folks are not as altruistic as your Northern Europeans. I mean, when you describe the Pakistani culture of you're required to have kinship with your closest family members, and it's kind of the in-group is more important, the family is more important, and that's more similar to Mediterranean cultures also have that sort of ideology in them, and then that's partially one of the reasons why I think they might survive longer than the Northern European cultures will survive.
That's right. I think they will, because they have more of a kinship sense, and a sense of whereas these Northern European cultures are very individualistic, and they think about their family, close relatives, and so on, but they don't have a strong sense of kinship or helping their relatives and so on.
Which is true, and unfortunately in Sweden, I mean, this translates into also children being dumped out of their houses at the age of 13 years of age, the elderly being left to rot on the side of the road and not being able to survive. And there's actually instances in Sweden of the elderly starving, literally dying of malnutrition, and this is quite remarkable in a wealthy first world country. The elderly dying of starvation. I mean, that would never happen in Italy. I mean, someone would take you in, and in Sweden, no one will take you in. Your own family rejects you, and I think that's a failing in certain cultures as well. So we can't always, point to other people, destroying our cultures. I mean, our own cultures have their own kind of failings as well.
That's right. Everybody, and the thing is, but those for example, the Pakistani culture or Iraq and Iran, they tend to be low trust cultures, and there's all this corruption, and they can't produce a civil society.
No.
That's the thing that these Northern European cultures are very good at. Creating societies based on law, creating societies that are fair, creating societies where you can trust people in authority and so on. They're not going to be corrupt and all that. So that's a huge advantage.
And that's why these people come here. That's why these people come here. I mean,
that's why they want to come here.
Yeah,
they're coming to societies that are well run, they're fair, there are economic opportunities and so on. That's what they want. But the more of these people that you get here, these societies are not going to be like that anymore. When if the Pakistanis were in charge of Britain, it would be corrupt again. It would be, you'd have all this public corruption. You wouldn't have a civil society anymore. And you just have this kinship-based clan-type societies. And there you have first cousin marriage would be the norm. That kind of thing would be what would happen to the UK.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier, and it's something interesting. You pointed out the white American women that went out to Haiti to help the black Haitians after the earthquake, and it reminded me of that Amanda Kajera. Have you heard her story? The white American university student went down to Haiti.
I think I've heard of that, but I don't know the details.
She was raped, and then when she came back during the rape, well, she went down there to kind of prove the idea that that you could help these people. So while she was down there, she was raped by her translator, her guide. She makes it all the more remarkable. During the rape, she's trying to convince him during the rape that she feels his pain and that she's there to help him. So she's raped, and as she's being raped, she tries to convince him. This is what she said on her blog after it happened. Whether it's true or not, no one knows, but it appears to be true. She went home and she blamed America for it, saying that the oppression of the black folks down in Haiti, the fact that they were brought over as slaves, they have some kind of transgenerational slavery disorder or something like that. Where they still feel this sort of, after centuries, they still feel the pain of slavery. So they're lashing out at the first white person they can see. So we can't really fault them for their behavior. So you raped me, not because you're a bad person, but because someone from my country 300 years ago possibly whipped you. And this is the reasoning they use. And I mean, this is madness. I mean, when I read this story, I thought to myself, it can't be true. This has to be a spoof or something. But as you get into it, you realize it's true. They really think this way.
Those sort of beliefs are really very, very much like religion, where you can't come up with any facts or anything that could dissuade them. They're just going to believe them no matter what. The facts are always filtered through these beliefs, and you don't change it. You see quite a bit of that. Actually, I remember a case of a woman that went over to Africa. She was gang raped by all these Somalis. It didn't change her attitudes in the least, and she just went back to helping them. It's just.
It's. I hate to laugh, but it's almost comical.
It is. It could be comical, I suppose, but this is our pathology. This is what's leading to the destruction of the West.
Yeah, it's quite. Obviously it's upsetting because you can see the result of it. But when you look at it from on an individual basis, you look at each case, and the idea that you would blame transgenerational slavery trauma on someone raping you, it's just quite remarkable. There was a fella, I think some white guy, who went down to the Ferguson riots, and as he was down there, he got beat up and his mobile phone was stolen. He went back home and his mother said, "You shouldn't have gone down there. The blacks that's the way they are." He then tweeted that, "Oh my God, worst night of my life. I lost my mobile phone and I discovered my mom's a racist."
Yeah, that's the reality. That's the pathetic thing. These people are so set in their beliefs. That's what we have to try to propagandize against. Get people to believe that our ideas and our community is a moral community. Because fundamentally they have this idea that their own people, their own culture are evil. And they've been taught that. They see that in the movies every day. And so that's the attitudes that they have.
Yeah, and when you earlier mentioned slavery, how whites were the first people to actually abolish slavery. I mean, and the poster child for the most hated nation on earth, the left's most hated nation, Britain. That's the first nation on earth to actually abolish slavery, fight slavery, sail the open seas, looking for slave ships to actually stop transatlantic slave trade. And yet, still, the left despises Britain the most and sees Britain as kind of the poster boy for slavery. When in fact, they're the one nation that actually stopped it.
When they talk about slavery, they just say, well, this is white people enslaved blacks. They don't talk about the fact that slavery is common in every other culture known to man, practically. that is very common in the Arab world, very common in Africa. They don't talk about that, but and they also don't mention the fact that whites were the only people, the only culture that banned slavery for moral reasons, and that completely is not part of the narrative, because what is being presented is simply a narrative of white evil. They don't want anything to get in the way of that, and so that's the way it's presented.
It's utterly shameful, and obviously there's lots of work to do. We can do our best as propagandizing people, as you said earlier, and just getting the information out there, getting the truth out there. Start presenting things from a moral standpoint. At this point now, I mean, there's no other choice.
We have to stress that, and so often in the past, people who have been white advocates have not been nice people, and they've advocated violence and hatred and everything else. We have to take the moral high ground, present our ideas as morally praiseworthy. That's the only way to get white people on our side. We have to think of it as a moral crusade. Otherwise, it's not going to appeal to whites. We can't appeal to them by saying, we're smarter than they're stupid, we have to kill them or something. That's just, that is a non-starter. We have to present our case as morally legitimate and something, really a morally based cause to advance our own interests and retake these lands that we've lost.
Has the white population, especially in the New World, been so damaged by cultural Marxism that it's hard to kind of reach decent people now? I mean, I'm not just even saying folks like women like Amanda Kajera, who are liberals, who are completely convinced that what you're saying and what I'm saying is evil, but also, unfortunately, a lot of people on the right are morally damaged as well. I mean, there's lots of obviously delinquents who, I see the comments on my own website, and I know that a lot of the people unfortunately, my articles attract are not the type of people that I want to see on the webpage. And I can't do anything about that. I mean, I wish I had kind of more genuine young people coming onto the site, students. But unfortunately, we get the type of people onto the site that just want to scream racial epithets and type hateful things, and it doesn't seem to help at all. Is part of the problem that we unfortunately maybe attracting people that are really damaged already?
We have to, when we have a website that has commentary, we have to censor all the comments to keep those people off of there, make it clear that they're not welcome, because we don't want to have that image. And so we actually on Occidental Observer now, I have a policy where each comment is moderated. We have to, and if there's any kind of hatred type comments, we see I'm sure some of these people come in there and they're trolls. They want to present the website in a bad light, but we have to prevent that kind of stuff. We have to have the image of smart people who are morally sound, that are morally motivated.
Is it an image, or is that the reality of the people that come on our websites? I'm just curious. I mean, I look, obviously I know my website, and I'd say 3 out of 10 comments, I can't believe what I've read myself, and that's not what I want on the page. And so I got basically 30% of the people who come onto my site, unfortunately, are coming as hateful people. Does it unfortunately attract the wrong people? Do we need to find people that are not reactionaries to actually find people who are kind of have a clean slate? Who unfortunately,
well, on my website, I've been encouraged by the quality of the comments. I haven't really had to moderate people out of there who are just saying advocating violence in a really brutal way and that kind of stuff, filled with hate. I haven't had to do that. I have had to remove comments that I think are from trolls, that people who are trying to present ideas that are just not welcome. But I've been encouraged. I think we're getting more and more well-educated people. That's the thing that's encouraging me. It's not just young people, but young, educated people. People who have been through the system, through the college courses, who are disillusioned, who realize that they've been sold a bill of goods, that this is their interests are being compromised, that this is just not right. And so they're coming to our side. So I'm very encouraged by the quality of the comments and the quality of the people that are getting involved.
Yeah, I think it's getting better. I mean, originally with my site, because of the fact that I have the word knights in it, for some odd reason, it appeared to attract people who were looking for something that was maybe similar to what the KKK presented, something very racially hateful. And I avoided that from the beginning. I used the word knights. I wanted to reclaim the word knights because it's obviously seen as something negative now. I mean, you're a European knight and you're somehow some sort of racist. I thought to myself, if sluts could reclaim the word slut, then why can't Europeans reclaim the word knight? But unfortunately, that negative connotation to knight pervades everything. It's across the board. You know, I've had people leave comments on my site which have said, you know, we love the article, but I can't share it because it's got your site has knights on it, and it's quite remarkable that but European culture has been denigrated to such an extent that even a knight has a negative connotation to it.
I wouldn't have had that connotation. To me, the word knight is very positive. You know, knights on the front table and all that. So.
It should be. Well, we'll do the best we can to reclaim all these terms. But it's been great speaking with you, and sorry we didn't get to all the questions I had, but hopefully we'll do this.
We'll do it again sometime.
We'll definitely do it again. I want to thank you for being on the program, and look forward to speaking to you again.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Do it again. Bye-bye.
Thank you.